the feeling of belonging and not belonging are so perhaps deeply ingrained in some queer experiences. And I think that what I've come to, I think, feel and understand as deeply a part of my queerness is this feeling of ambivalence, right? This feeling of belonging, not belonging, fitting in, not fitting in, caring, not caring, and I think that realization is, something that has a lot of potential. There's so much potential in ambivalence. It's like a not settling. It's like something that perhaps is aspirational and is always looking for something else.
Hello, I am Kay Anderson, and you are listening to Lost Spaces, the podcast that mourns the death of queer nightlife. Every episode, I talk to a different person about a venue from their past, the memories they created there, and the people that they used to know. Mecija is a multi-disciplinary artist, academic, and musician who used to be the lead singer for the indie pop band Ohbijou and now records as a solo artist. And you should definitely be checking out her music because it is amazing. We caught up to talk about the Beaver, an alternative queer space in the heart of Queen West, Toronto, that closed in 2020 primarily because of restrictions in place due to the coronavirus pandemic. What do you think are the important ingredients for a queer space?
Right. If you ask my younger self, it would be
alcohol, yeah.
Something to drink, music, preferably R&B and hip hop, and darken lights. So the lights as dim as possible. And
smoke machine, or is that optional?
I'm just not into a smoke machine, to be honest. Yeah,
Makes
gets
sense.
a little. Those spaces already get hot. But if you were to ask my older self, I would say a clean bathroom, because all of the queer venues of my memory just had really horrible bathrooms, and I just remember the smell, and I know that so much of what that story is about is the queer bathroom is something that should be its own podcast, right?
Wait, tell me more.
But
what do you mean?
I just mean the bathroom is where, queer people often go to have sex and, get messy.
But they can do it neatly, can't they?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, they can, absolutely. They can do, but is it being done, neatly? I'm not sure. So those are the bathrooms of my memory, and so my present self would love a clean bathroom, but maybe that doesn't jive with the brand of the queer venue, I think.
Wait, so that's all the older self wants for a queer space is a clean bathroom.
A clean bathroom. No, I still want I still want good music. I still want to dance. And I just want it to be a space where where the programming and the people in charge really do think really closely to how they can make as many people feel as welcomed as possible.
That is important. Just because I can't stop thinking about dirty bathrooms, I always thought that it was kind of like a business ploy. Like if you kept it dirty, people wouldn't spend too much time there, and then they would come back out and drink.
Right. I never thought of it that way. I definitely did not spend very much time in the bathroom because of the state that they were in.
Yeah, get in, get out. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. definitely. Yeah, there was a venue in Toronto called the Holy Oak that just was such a beautiful space and had really amazing events, but just had the smelliest bathroom. Yeah, and that's like more about, Toronto and, the cost of renovating a bathroom and things like that than it is on the venue owners, for sure.
So if I come to Toronto, I should expect every venue to have a stinky bathroom.
I mean, there's stinky bathrooms. Yeah, I'm not going to say I'm not going to do a blanket statement by any means, but you should. I mean,
so visit Toronto. Our bathrooms are stinkier than other cities.
I mean, you're in the UK. Where are you in the UK?
In London.
You have stinky bathrooms too, probably, no?
Well, I mean, I'm not sure if it's like, a selling point of the city.
Right.
I mean, yes, I can think of some stinky bathrooms, but
yeah, I mean, I think maybe it's a sensorial memory of queer bars that is looked back
maybe
with
the
affection.
Maybe the reality is I'm just like a filthier person than you, so I don't notice so much.
Maybe I would. I don't know.
You don't need to respond. That's fine. Okay, so let us just like rewind and let's talk about the Beaver. So you said it was around the corner from your house.
Yeah, I was lucky to live on a street called Bellwoods Avenue, which was about a 10 to 15 minute walk from the Beaver. I lived there in my early to mid 20s. And, it was a place that myself and the bassist of a band that I used to play in called Ohbijou would often go to after practice because it was a, queer positive, queer friendly space. And we had friends that DJ'd there, and it felt like an appropriate, venue to frequent and support.
Mm-hmm. But you said in our correspondence that you were fairly neutral about it.
Mm-hmm. I mean, I appreciate the opportunities that a space like the Beaver creates for queer and trans people to gather and party. But when I was frequenting that space as a younger queer person, it felt like a predominantly white space, and that felt alienating to me. Perhaps it was, mostly the times that I frequented there. Maybe those were the reason why those spaces were, white. Maybe they had parties that I didn't know about, but the majority of time that I've spent there has largely been populated by, white seeming people. And I just, find myself feeling a little alienated in those spaces. Mm. So it, as a queer person and, having a desire to, not fit in, but, find,
connect,
connect and, forge intimacies with people that are deeper than, that can think about, one's gender, race, class, all of those things together. The Beaver didn't really give that to me. And so while I appreciate what it offered to people, it just wasn't, it just doesn't hold that space in my heart, in the same way that it does for other people.
Yeah. And so how does your experience in a bar like the Beaver compare to your experience as a gigging musician and on the band scene in Toronto? I
mean, my experience as a gigging musician was very similar, and that is largely one of the reasons why, not that I started to lose interest in gigging, but wanted to sort of forge my own path and create my own opportunities for gigging that felt comfortable to me. I played in an orchestral rock band for over a decade. We were classified as indie music, and
is there air quotes around that?
Yeah, there's definitely indie music, and so that indie scene I think there's a particular figure or person that comes to mind that isn't a small queer Filipinx person as fronting, an indie band. So, Canadian music at that time when we were playing felt largely cis, white, male. And, it just became a psychic space, an emotional space I didn't want to occupy all of the time.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's and I'm really sorry to be one of those people who's like, oh yeah, your experience is exactly like mine, because that's not what I'm trying to do. But having similar experiences as a musician in being in like cis white heterosexual male dominated spaces, and trying to explain why that's difficult and why that's kind of emotionally exhausting sometimes, can be really difficult for people who just don't get it, who just who just feel comfortable in those types of spaces. So I can appreciate that, although it's not necessarily anything that anyone is actively doing to try and make you feel uncomfortable, or I mean, that's maybe not the right word. That's maybe a clumsy word. That it's just tough, isn't it? Yeah.
I mean, it's just a reminder of the insidious ways that white supremacy operates, in its benevolence. And I think that benevolence is can be unevenly painful for some. And the weight of that is something that, I often tap out of, like I would rather go, hang out and eat dinner at a friend's house, than subject myself to a space that might not feel that great.
Mm-mm. So if we take a walk down memory lane, and you've just had a band practice, and it's gone well. Let's say it's gone well. You've played some new songs. You managed to fit everything into the practice, and then you and your bass player go to the Beaver. What's that feeling when you walk through the door?
That's a really good question. It's a very visceral question, because I immediately imagine myself walking on a cold autumn night, the 10 minutes down Queen Street, which, from the time that I moved into that Bellwoods house when I was in my early 20s to now has changed so much. The gentrification of Toronto, particularly Toronto, Queen Street West, has been pretty astounding, which is the reason why these queer spaces don't really exist anymore, to be honest. But yeah, so walking down Queen Street on a cold, crisp night and stepping into the Beaver and immediately being hit by, a feeling of warmth, not just temperature, but I don't know if you can smell warmth, but if I feel like I can smell the space, which is a combination of, spilt beer and sweat and, vegan burritos or whatever on, vegetarian chili or something, and, music that always, made me feel curious and interested in what was happening in the space. So, as much as I talk about feeling alienated from that space, it's nice to talk about it, because I did feel like, even though there were moments where I didn't connect with the programming there or the people that were there, I'm just so grateful that it was there. Because that sensorial experience of entering a space made or hoping to be made for you is important.
So the first thing to feed back is sensorial is an amazing word. Thank you for using it. And secondly, can we talk more about the music? Like you said that it was surprising. on occasion. What kind of thing would you expect to hear there?
I mean, I don't know how you would like. So this was kind of the time when yeahs were popular. So I don't actually remember how to classify that music, that genre of music.
Which era? Like the first?
Like the Maps era.
Okay. So,
like, what is that?
It
It was not a space for, like, at that time. I didn't hear. Yeah, I didn't hear much. Indigo Girls or. Well, not on purpose, because I think they did have like purposeful nights for, Indigo Girls and, lesbian icons. But
is that the go-to in Canada? Like we've got to attract more women. Indigo Girls.
I mean, I think so. Indigo Girls, Melissa Etheridge. I don't know. Tracy Chapman just surfaced recently, right? And so I think like lesbians everywhere are just, like taking their clothes off.
I knew it.
Ready to start a revolution. I think it was just like post-punk. Maybe that is the best way to describe the music there. I know that a lot of the Beaver is inspired by the work of Will Monroe, the artist Will Monroe, the activist Will Monroe, who organized a party in Toronto called Vaseline, which was a queer party. And they played a lot of post-punk music there, for sure.
Mm. And sticking to this post-band practice,
mm-hmm.
Where's your head generally at after a rehearsal?
It was generally at that time looking for a drink, looking for a place to unwind. And, I had a lot of fun at band practice. And, in my younger years, we had a lot of fun. So the Beaver was an extension of that fun, but in a more queer way. So it also holds a special place in my heart because it's the space where my partner of like over a decade and I, would dance together and flirt with each other. So there was one night there where we had a very lovely time together dancing.
Okay, well, you can't just leave it at that. You're going to have to give me a bit more info than that.
Yeah. I mean, I like my partner and I were still trying to figure out whether or not we could be together because of arrangements that were already in place with other partners, and so. The Beaver was a space where the music and dancing helped us to sort of affirm our desires for each other politely.
So do you mean snug?
No, no. The desire to snug was definitely affirmed there.
I see.
It was, the times that I did dance there were great.
Okay, I can sense that you're feeling a bit uncomfortable. I'm not going to push that. So why was it just your bass player that came with you for an after rehearsal drink?
I mean, my other bandmates would come too, but my bass player and I used to go because we were the two queers in the band. So my bass player, Heather Kirby's queer as well. And, it was like our queer time together. Like, two queers walking down Queen Street to have a queer drink, at the queer bar. The other band members would come with us sometimes, for sure. But perhaps there was a unconscious recognition that this was not necessarily a space for them or built for them. I was in a band with like two white guys and, mostly straight people. So I think that there was a desire to keep that a space that was just for us. I hope that was the case, at least.
It's really interesting though, like given that that like I'm making this a bigger deal than it is. Sorry, but that precious post rehearsal time when you just get to like be with one another rather than having that purpose.
Yeah, I mean, I think Heather, who played in Ohbijou with me and who's my like queer companion in the band, I think that like when we were on tour in different countries and different cities, like we would often seek out queer spaces together, right? And queer bars together, just as a way to, remind ourselves, or not remind ourselves, because you never forget that you're queer, but just to find a space that, felt different than, the bars that we were playing and the venues that we were always accustomed to because of the music that we played.
I recently had an interview with Melissa Ferrick, and she talked about that someone had once reflected to her that she made any venue a queer venue when she performed because of the energy that she brought, because of who she was as a performer. Did you feel in that band that you were able to bring your queerness to it?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that I don't know whether or not I transformed it into a queer space necessarily, but I do think that part of the power I felt with that band was that I could be in these different, typically white, typically straight spaces and sing queer love songs. These songs that I wrote were to women and were about intimacy and were about desire and were about, seeking, closeness and things like that. And I would be singing these lyrics about queer desire to straight people, which to me felt like a happy intervention. And like we toured all across Canada, and if you can imagine, there are queer and trans people everywhere, but in some of these spaces, I was like, well, yeah. In some of these small bars, I was like, well, the queer love song prevails without your knowledge. So yeah.
Did you ever chicken out? Oh, I guess it's different when you're with a band, but like, because you've probably already arranged your set. But did you ever chicken out of performing particular queer songs because of the way the audience was interacting with you?
Not really. I think because my lyrics weren't explicitly queer. Like, I wasn't. There's nothing that I think you could read in my lyrics that would point to, my queerness in any way. So I wasn't afraid to play these songs per se. Nor did I ever feel like I couldn't play them in spaces because the lyrics were sort of surreptitious or secretive. I wanted to play them even more in these spaces, I think. It's an interesting relationship, the audience and the performer, and like what lyrics and what stories you can tell through music that don't necessarily align with perhaps the expectations of audience members or things like that.
Yeah, and there's also this other thing, like I like, it's really easy to assume that everyone is like you. So I always assume that people care about the lyrics, but I don't recognize that about 90% of the audience aren't actually listening to the lyrics.
Yeah, or hearing, or like they're barely audible.
Yeah. Or they're hearing the words, they're just not kind of connecting with them at that time. Which I find so fascinating. Like, how can you enjoy music and not enjoy the story?
I mean, I was that type of listening was brought to my attention by our cellist, who I have played music with for, again, close to a decade. And she's like, I don't really listen to the lyrics. I was like, I listen to the music. And so, yeah, immediately I was like, oh, that kind of hurts, because I work so hard. Like, I thought you knew me, or I hoped that you would know me in some way. But I was like, oh, right. Just like people enjoy different aspects of music. Mm. Like, I'm a lyric person. I like to listen to lyrics. I like to figure out how they're crafted and things like that. But some people just like to, listen to the cello and drums and guitars and things like that.
Yeah, it's fascinating. And I guess it's that thing, like, when you've written something, you just assume that everyone's interpreting it in the same way that you do. But there are songs that, like, you've listened to, like, 3,000 times, and then suddenly one day you go, that's what that's about. Oh, I get it now. But yeah, it's just fascinating the way that people engage and interact with these things that are things but aren't things at the same time. Oh God, sorry, I sound quite stupid.
No, not at all. I mean, I think that, and when these songs and when these compositions enter into a venue, the possibilities and the impacts that they have are, again, transformed. Like when you are playing music in a concert versus listening to that song on I almost said cassette tape. Oh my God. When you're streaming it on Spotify, when you're listening to it at home, it just changes how you relate to people, I think.
Yeah. And conscious listening as well, which I don't do much of anymore. I used to sit in my room, like CDs, and sit in the dark and put a CD on and just sit and listen to the CD, and I just would never even contemplate doing that now.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that is?
Because there's always something else to do. And maybe I get my fill of that type of thing when I go for walks and listen to music. Maybe, I don't know.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I used to do that as well as when I was in high school, would religiously listen to music and listen to the lyrics. But now I find the most pleasure I get from music is on a commute or when I'm driving, and I think that's because I'm just much older and I have different responsibilities.
And so, do you remember hearing about the Beaver closing? I mean, it was very recently, so of course you do.
I do remember hearing about the Beaver closing. I read it online, as many people have read it or read the news. And yeah, I was not surprised, but still felt sad for the loss of that space and what it, was providing for people.
Why do you say you were not surprised?
I mean, a venue like that on a street like that where, rent is forever increasing and where support for, the arts is in turmoil because of the situation we're in right now. There's really no way that a bar can sustain itself. And so, I just wasn't surprised because I didn't know what sort of supports it could get or was receiving.
Mm-hmm. And you talked earlier about the rapid gentrification within Toronto. What's kind of happening around the area where the Beaver was?
It's still, is condo development. There's a condo development that is directly, I think, across the street from the Beaver that, I think houses hundreds upon hundreds of people, and closer to the Gladstone, which is, again, like a 5-minute walk from the Beaver, there's another condo development. There's just condos popping up everywhere.
I have a really dumb question. Sorry. Is a condo just an apartment, or is there something else about it?
Is a condo just an apartment? So I think a condo is a condominium is a collection of apartments. Maybe. I don't know.
Sorry.
Maybe.
I'm used to hearing that word.
Is this not a word that,
no.
it's a large property complex. So yeah, it's that's divided into small units.
Okay.
Divided into apartments.
Oh, okay. But so you would say an apartment is like a house that was converted into 3 separate living spaces?
Yeah.
Okay.
You know what? That's tough, because I would also say that something that someone might call a condo could also be called an apartment. I don't know. I think that I'm not.
Sorry. Okay. Sorry. I've taken us off somewhere we don't need to be. But we've both learned something, maybe.
Yeah. I mean, it's something that I'm going to think about after we hang up. Mm-hmm.
So there's just kind of condos popping up all over the place.
Yeah. I mean, they've been popping up for, over a decade in that area. And so an area that was once coined Queer West is, I think, slowly unqueering itself because of these condo developments.
So then what do you think is going to happen? This is a very big question. What do you think is going to happen to the scene or queer spaces in general in Toronto?
I mean, I think that I don't know what's going to happen to this, like the brick and mortars. I don't know what's going to happen to the bars that are, queer bars. I know that there will always be queer events being programmed in different bars across the city. There's a really exciting party in Toronto called New Ho King, which is focused on creating space for people of color, but particularly Asian queers and Asian trans people. And that's a party that, travels across different bars and spaces. So I think that, sustaining a bar is likely difficult, and not even the move to like that assumes that these moves haven't already been happening. But I think there'll just be a more, I just think the focus will be parties and events.
But who hosts the parties if the bars don't exist?
That's a good question. I mean, so Yes, Y'all, the party that I was talking about before, was often held at a bar that wasn't a queer bar, but perhaps a queer-friendly bar, owners who are queer-friendly. And the same with this party that I'm talking about called New Ho King, often occupies a space called the Great Hall, which is not a queer space by any means, but it's capitalism, right? If your party will make money, anyone can be queer friendly.
Those are the rules, yeah.
But I mean, we still have the Village in Toronto, and there are. I can't speak about the Village and the spaces that are there because I don't frequent that area enough, and don't know enough about our Village in Toronto, which maybe is sad, but there are still bars there.
But is maybe not that surprising given what type of bars are there.
Yeah. There is one space there called Glad Day Bookstore, which is a bookstore, but also doubles as an event space, community space. And, I've been to a number of book launches, and I know that they hold shows and things like that there that are, I guess, perhaps more diverse, for the lack of a better word, than what is typically seen on the strip there. But I don't have a committed relationship to the village by any means. Could be because I'm a lesbian, but but who knows?
Yeah. You do get, like, speaking in a very broad sense, and not identifying as a lesbian myself, lesbians do get the short straw when it comes to venues.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. I guess there was one bar called the Hen House that was around, I guess, on a street that's parallel to where the Beaver was. That was built for lesbians specifically. By lesbians.
Built for lesbians.
Yeah, built for lesbians, for lesbians, by lesbians. And it had its run, and a lot of people went there. So I went there sometimes too. I played a game of Suck and Blow there. Where you take the playing cards, and do you know that game?
No, but it sounds like a game we'll never ever play again.
Absolutely. Yeah. No more Suck and Blow.
Is it like the one with the ball under your chin that you have to then pass on?
Yeah, you kind of like hold a playing card at your lips and you are sucking it in and you pass it.
And stick it on someone's forehead?
No, you try and pass it to someone else's lips.
Oh, okay.
And so, if you're not successful, then you're met with a little kiss.
From who? The person you were supposed to pass it to?
The person that you're passing it to. So if you can't...
okay, yeah.
If you don't maintain the flow
of... Yeah. So it's not that's your kind of punishment. It's just that's what happens because there's no card in between.
Yeah.
Yeah.
If you lose the suction, there's a little kiss. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, germs.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Lots and lots of germs. Did you ever go to the Beaver? Well, if you did, tell me about it. Find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook with the username KAndersonMusic and tell me all about what you got up to. You can also find out more about Casey by visiting her website, www.caseymecija.com, and her surname is spelled Mecija. And if you want to hear more about the Beaver, then you should definitely check out my interview with Prawn Waters about the very same bar and their experiences there. Lost Spaces is not only a podcast, but a concept record as well. I've been writing songs about queer venues and the people who used to live their lives there, and will be releasing songs over the coming year. You can hear the first single, Well Grown Boys, which is also playing underneath my talking right now on all good streaming platforms. If you like this episode, I would really appreciate if you could subscribe, leave a review on Apple Podcasts, or just tell people who you think might be interested in giving it a little listen too. I am Kay Anderson, and you have been listening to Lost Spaces.